This is the free audiobook of Elemental Power, written and read for you by April Ames. If you haven't read the previous chapters, please click the link in the description or in the pinned comment. That will take you to the playlist. There you can start at Chapter 1 or pick up where you left off. Part 1. Shattered. Chapter 5. Ambius the Wise. We came within 5 paces of the paneled wooden door of the cottage, when Gable whirled and placed his hand firmly in the middle of Glenn's chest, stopping him in mid-stride. I stopped alongside him. Glenn looked down at Gable, waiting. "You cannot enter the home of the Watcher," he said, with great superiority. "Why not?" I asked. "Because he is a soldier. He has taken lives, and the Watcher is a guardian of peace. He would not like his floor to be trodden with blood." He sneered and pulled the last of the wine out of the bag. I was surprised he was still standing. The hut was circular, made of stacked and mortared gray stones, with slate shingles and a crooked chimney billowing white smoke. The lawn around it was tidy, and there was a small raised garden. Some of the plants looked familiar, like something from my world. I took a few steps toward the front door, drawn by the sense of hot tea and sweets. Before I reached it, though, it opened, and a tall but badly hunched man came out and twinkled at me. He was wearing a dark silver robe, and I instantly thought wizard, with no knowledge of how that thought had appeared. His long beard was white and frizzy, matching his hair beneath a pointy hat. Gray eyes shined merrily from his wizened face and peeked out between bushy old man eyebrows. He spread his arms wide, and the bell sleeves flapped in the wind. Come in, I've been expecting you." He shook my hand with both of his. "You are here at last. Come in, my dear." I stepped forward, drawn in by his expansive personality. Then I remembered what Gable had said and hesitated. "Gable says that his brother Glenn can't come inside. Is that true?" I hung back a moment, waiting for the answer. The old man began to survey the brothers, sucking on his mustache as he thought, a feat made easier by his lack of teeth. Both elves looked uncomfortable under this scrutiny. He turned to me when he had finished the examination, eyes merry as ever. "It is true. My home is small, and only one besides yourself would be comfortable." Gable swaggered forward like a peacock. "I think, my dear, that you may have your choice of companions," the old man said, poking me in the ribs with ancient bony fingers and smiling. "Oh, well, then I choose Glenn." "Final answer?" he asked, smiling so widely his toothless gums were visible. I watched with satisfaction as Gable deflated. "Yep, without a doubt," I said, nodding. Glenn smiled shyly and began to move toward us, but Gable swung his arm in the way again and barred him from coming closer. "But, Master Ambius, I have brought her to you. I have walked to Wooddale and back just to bring her. You must, really, I must protest. I belong in the council, not this uneducated man of blood." His words were slurred and he swayed, but he was stubborn. It was hard to understand him by this point, and Ambius leaned in closely with his hand cupped around his ear, squinting as if that would help him to comprehend. Glenn stepped back again, but Gable kept his arms stretched out, barring the way. I exchanged a glance with Glenn, waiting. The crumpled old man suddenly rose up to his full height, a bit taller than Glenn, and the jovial antiquarian act fell away as his voice thundered and the wind swept up around us and flapped our clothing. "Gable, you intemperate fool! The lady has chosen. Go to the tent and sleep off your stupor. Now." Gable shrank at the rebuke. Clutching his last bottle tightly, he ripped out the cork with his teeth and staggered away. Ambius beckoned Glenn to come in and shook his frizzy head apologetically at us both. "Gable is a great fool, but he loves his vocation, and I haven't had the heart to send him away from my service." He shrugged and ushered us into the little hut. It was cozy inside, definitely only suitable for 3 at the most. There was a large stone hearth, which served as heat, cooktop, and oven. A kettle was singing, and he hurried to take it off the fire. A small round table with 2 chairs were the only furnishings, aside from a little gray cot to the right of the hearth, and a cedar chest at the foot of that. Shiny copper utensils hung from nails above the mantel, and the tiny countertop that served as the kitchen was heaped with sweets and a tea service. Ambius bade us sit at the table, but Glenn offered to stand as there were only 2 chairs. The old man turned pink at that and giggled like a little girl, which made us laugh as well. He swirled his right arm in the air, mumbled something incomprehensible, and a beautiful wooden throne was thrust under Glenn and knocked him back into it, forcing him to sit. I laughed and clapped. Ambius bowed. Glenn thanked our host, but stood and offered him the elegant chair. No, 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 Ambius muttered, bringing the heaps of food and drink to set on the table. The chair chooses the sitter. If I were to sit, it would likely turn into a grave and gobble me up. He laughed. It was an airy, wheezy laugh, and comforting. He served us tea, which was excellent, and then he sat back with his own cup and eyed me thoughtfully. You're not what I expected. Neither are you, I agreed. I'm not at all sure I'm the one you've been waiting for, but I've come to see if you can help me find out who I am. I took what looked like a cookie off the tray and bit it. It was sweet and delicious, made of ground nuts and dates with vanilla and cinnamon. Oh, you're the one. No doubt about it. No doubt about it, he said. He took a cookie, dipped it merrily, bit it with his gums, depositing crumbs in his beard, and took a slurp of tea. No, my dear. You are indeed the heir of the warlord. You have his look about you. I nearly choked on my bite of cookie. No one had said anything about me being his heir. How could we be related? I shivered, remembering the creature that had hovered above me in the bloody stone room. I look like him? Have you seen him? Glenn studied me, his eyes soaking in my details. I squirmed. He noticed and hid a grin as he looked away, his chest bouncing with silent laughter. Ambius nodded vigorously, jumped up and scrambled over to the chest at the foot of his bed, mumbling to himself, It's got to be in here somewhere. He put the entire top half of his body into it because, of course, it was a magic chest. I raised my eyebrows at Glenn, who returned the gesture. He liked the old wizard as much as I did. Pulling himself out of the chest, Ambius held a roll of parchment high above his head, dancing a jig as he came over to place it in front of me. Look, he ordered, and sat down again. I unrolled the scroll carefully at arm's length, holding it so that Glenn could see it too, and nearly dropped it when I saw the face. His hair was black like mine, wavy like mine, long like mine. His eyes were a fierce green, not brown, but the shape was almost exactly the same. His jaw was mine, as were his lips, and had he been a woman, his nose would have been mine too. It was spooky. I saw Glenn shiver a bit when he saw it. You see? You are his heir, Ambius spoke through a mouthful. Do you have the mark? I don't know. What is it? What's it look like? Ambius stood once more, but this time went to the mantel. There was a small red box there next to a jar of quills. He opened the box, pulled out a scrap of white paper, and grabbed a quill and inkwell. Without speaking further, he drew a triangle with an eye at the top. My trembling hands moved to pick up my teacup and spilled the tea onto the little table. Ah, so you've seen it. Yes, I only noticed it yesterday, I said, completely in shock. May I see it? Well, it's in a pretty delicate place. Oh, you needn't worry about me, my dear. I'm a very old man. Let's have a look. He smiled his gummy smile and patted my hand. I stood, unbuttoned my trousers, and pulled them down to expose my right buttock. I swiveled the mark toward him, my natural blush deepening with embarrassment. Aha! Ambius exclaimed giddily, clutching my bottom with both hands, his face an inch away from the crude tattoo. The shattered one is here. You're here. Splendid, splendid. He swiveled me around so that Glenn could have a look too. Do you see, elf? This is the one we have waited for, the one to end all wars. The old wizard dissolved in a fit of giggles until the hiccup finally quelled his merriment and he wiped his moist eyes with the hem of his sleeve. I covered myself back up, noticing the faint redness that had come up in Glenn's cheeks at the sight of my bare bottom. The only one not embarrassed by the sight was the old wizard, who was slurping tea once more. The spilled tea began to drip on the packed earth floor. Taking my seat, I looked at Ambius and asked, What do you need me to do? He patted my cheeks with his wrinkly old hands and smiled. That's a good question. Let's get down to it then. Did Gable give you the prophecy? Do you know it? Yes, he told me, I answered. I also confided the part about Glenn burning the order to bring me and getting arrested so that he could come along as my protector, asking, You can help us with that, right? Ambius smiled broadly at Glenn. What a remarkable elf you are, my lad, he said. Waving his hand in the air again, a piece of paper appeared on the table before Glenn. Giant gold letters spelled the word, "Pardoned." "Thank you," Glenn said and bowed his head in respect.
"Think nothing of it,"
Ambius answered with his own little nod.
"Who knows what might have happened without you there? You were followed. Did Nanu tell you?"
I had been beaming at Ambius with gratitude, but it dimmed when he said that last bit. "Yes, I wanted to ask you about that," I said. "Who was following us?" Ambius leaned back in his chair again, reaching an ancient arm behind him to clutch a long wooden pipe from the mantel. He snapped his fingers and a flame appeared, lighting the bowl as he pulled air through with noisy puffs. It smelled familiar. All at once, recognition jolted through me. How could I ever forget that smell? It was cannabis. That was the plant I'd seen growing in his tiny garden outside. He must have noticed the look on my face, for he smiled his gummy ancient smile at me.
"Excellent for the ills of old age," he said in response to my unspoken thought. "It is a most wonderful herbal remedy, the Creator's most proficient medicine. Now, as to who's following you, they are fairies, hunting you because they know you're here in our world. You're safe within the sight of my cottage, but when you begin your journey, they will be there, tracking you. They are a sect of the warlords, from the house of Rune." He puffed on his pipe. "Be warned, they will attack. They also revere the prophecy of Flint."
"But why would anyone living here want the total destruction of the world? It seems suicidal to me."
"It is," he agreed. "But they have been promised rewards in the afterlife for doing the warlord's business. They don't understand that only the Creator can grant such rewards. The races have long since lost the ability to communicate with him."
"You're talking about God?" My skepticism was growing.
"Yes, the same God of your world, the creator of all things in this realm and yours, and countless others."
He paused, smoking quietly, allowing that to soak in.
"Do you not have a record of angelic beings coming down to make wives of earth women? And bearing children, they produced a most fearsome and evil race, called the Nephilim?"
"Never heard of it. Why?"
"Because," he said, and passed the cookies to Glenn, "your many times great-grandfather was one of that race. Later in your book it says there were giants in the land, in those days and also afterward. They never really left, you see. They carry with them sacred knowledge of heavenly places, heavenly wars, angelic power and blood. The warlord brought that knowledge and power here to the elemental world."
"Okay, so there are Nephilim worshippers out there stalking me because I'm the heir? Do they think I have powers that would help them do something? Or are they just after me because they think I'm a threat to them?"
"They only want to see the will of the warlord done. That means eliminating any threat to his cause. They do not venerate you as his progeny. Only he is important in their minds. I would stay hidden from them for as long as possible, though that may become difficult as the deadline grows nearer."
"Oh, yeah. I have, 6 moon cycles before time is up? How long is that?" I asked.
"There are 2 moons.
He swirled his hand and the ceiling magically disappeared, revealing the brilliant night sky and 2 bright, nearly full moons.
When both moons are dark, that ends 1 moon cycle. It begins and ends at the dark of the moon. It takes about 70 sunrises for the moons to complete 1 cycle, and we're halfway through the first one."
"Oh, that's quite a bit of time," I said, feeling better. "It's a big world, and we only have 5.5 moon cycles left until it ends," Glenn said softly. He put out his hand and squeezed mine, then drew it back quickly. "But it can be done. I will help in every way that I can."
"Of course you will," Ambius cheered. "Now, the plan is this. You must get all of the waters to re-establish contact with the Creator. That can only happen when we all focus our energy on him at the same time. So, you must convince them. What I suggest is that you find horses kind enough to help you and let them carry some of the burden as you journey around our world."
"Do the animals talk here?" I asked. imagining pleasant horsey conversation as I toured this strange world. Both men looked at me.
"No, Alana, none of the regular animals talk," Glenn answered.
"But Nanu did," I reminded him.
"Yes, but Nanu is my familiar," Ambius corrected. "He has to talk, doesn't he? Anyway, back to business. You must go to the south first. It's getting on for late autumn, and you don't want to be traveling in the northern lands in the snow. Next, turn to the west, and finally, in spring, the north. Do not travel at night, and make sure your fire does not go out. If it does, the creatures that follow you will be able to attack. They stay in the shadows. They fear the light. A fire will protect you in the darkness, and the sun will frighten them away. Beware of caves and hollows where the shadows are thick. The creatures are no longer dwarves. The evil they worship has changed them into monsters. Be always afraid of the dark."
I shuddered, but nodded my understanding. Glenn nodded as well, and Ambius put away his pipe. He stood, cleared the table and the spilled tea with a sweep of his arm, and motioned us to our feet.
"Tonight you will sleep in the safety of my dominion," he said,
and with a wave at the door it opened, and a large tent was visible in the field, glowing with firelight.
"I believe you'll find Gable there, passed out and snoring."
"I apologize for my brother, master," Glenn said.
No need. I've had the raising of him for the past 30 ages. If there's any blame to rest, it must rest upon me. I'm afraid it comes with the job, you see. He has always been in the presence of greatness and magic, but never able to perform it himself. He has copied the texts over and over until they are lodged in his brain like a catchy tune that he really dislikes but can't forget. It would drive any man to drink."
"Is that what you are, Ambius? A man?" I asked, as I stepped out the door and into the moonlight. The bluish-silver glow was brighter here than on Earth, twice as bright. It cast Ambius in a soft luminescence and washed the golden highlights from Glenn's hair.
"No, my dear, that special office is yours alone in the whole of creation. You humans are the Creator's special children, made in his own image. I am merely a watcher, an ancient race of protectors from the time before the great angelic wars. We four were given this realm as our home and jurisdiction. I do long for the days when we can talk to him again. He always told the best jokes,"
he said, smiling to himself wistfully. Then he closed the door and left us to the night air. Glenn and I walked into the tent to find it fully furnished, providing everything we could possibly need, including a private toilet area. Gable was sprawled on a cot, snoring obnoxiously, with his precious bottle of wine clutched to his chest like a teddy bear. "Is there any way to get him to stop snoring?" I asked as I stepped behind a dressing screen to put on the blue silk robe provided by Ambius. It was nearly identical to his. "He will make noise until he dies," Glenn answered from behind his own dressing screen. I wasn't sleepy at all, so I went to the center of the tent where a large hole in the roof allowed the night sky to be admired and the smoke from the fire to escape. I sat on the dirt floor and put my hands over my ears to block out the racket. Looking down at the fire and between my feet, I noticed a tiny box that hadn't been there before. Inside it was a note and a neatly folded black square of cloth. I read the note aloud. "This is a snore blocker. Put it over the face of the offender. The sound of his slumber will no longer rankle, thus violence will be spared." Glenn came up behind me as I read, picked up the snore blocker, and swiftly strode to the noisome elf. He held the cloth taut between his hands, lowering it over Gable's face. For a moment it looked as if he planned to suffocate him, but decided against it. He let the cloth fall into place. Instantly, the wretched sound stopped, and we both sighed happily. Glenn sat next to me on the ground by the fire, and we stared into the flames for a while. His robe was a deep green, but looked to be the same make and material as my own. There were shimmering strands of silver embroidery running along every seam and decorating the chest area with delicate leaves. The green deepened the yellow specks in his eyes so they became like gold flakes in a fish bowl. It darkened his hair as well, from the dark blonde I'd first noticed, to warm, soft amber waves. The firelight cast his sharp features in dancing shadow. I felt him stir, shifting his legs to get more comfortable. I did the same, wishing there were some floor pillows. When I put my hands behind me for support, I found that some pillows had appeared, and I handed some to Glenn. "Thank you," I said to whomever or whatever had granted my wish. I looked around at the empty air of the tent. No answer came. Glenn picked up a stick to stir the fire. The flickering light made him glow. He caught me watching him and smiled that incredible smile of his. I felt a flutter low in my belly, and warmth seeped into me. I pulled my knees up to my chest and wrapped my arms around them, hiding my face from him. I tried to harden my heart against him, not liking the visceral reaction he had inspired. "Are you going to do it?" he asked. "I don't know." I looked up at the sky and saw the 2 moons hanging there, pregnant with blue light, shining down on us. The thought that this beautiful world could end was inconceivable. "What do you not know?" he asked. He seemed irritated by my indifference, tense. "I don't know anything," I said, drawing in the dirt with my finger. "I certainly don't know if I can save your world. I'm all alone on a foreign planet. I'm an alien. How could I possibly know?" "If you don't do it, we will all perish. Do you know that?" The last part bordered on sarcasm, but I couldn't be sure. It had been a long day. I gave him the benefit of the doubt. "Yes, I've been told, but I don't know. What if the prophecy is wrong? What if it's not? How should I know? I didn't ask to come here. I was sacrificed, sent here by some form of magic. Y'all have been all like, 'Hello, how are you? Save our planet, please.'" I smeared out my drawing. It had been a person standing alone under the moons, but now it was back to the dust it had been. I barely had time to breathe, let alone decide what I'm going to do. "If it were me, I'd do it without hesitation," he said, looking away from me and the fire. "Well, good for you." "What?" He looked at me sharply. "Look, it's easy for you to say you'd do it. You have a stake in this game. I don't. This isn't a game, Alana. It's life or death." His words slapped me in the face. I shook with frustration. I wanted to keep the argument going if for no other reason than to be mad at him. Anger was comfortable. It shoved the growing regard I had for him behind a wall of irritation. Turning my face to him, a scathing retort on my tongue, I saw the haunted look on his face once again. Loving instincts vaulted over the wall of irritation, and it crumbled. My whole body was drawn to him. The need to comfort and reassure him was a terrible pressure. I resisted the urge to hold him in order to make that look go away. I let my shoulders drop, releasing the tension, and my loaded comeback. "It's late. I'm going to bed. Good night." I stood and marched to my cot, not looking back in his direction. "Yes, it is late," he said, still staring into the flames with shadowed, haunted eyes. The wood in the fire popped loudly, a shower of sparks flying upward before raining back down, their light washing away the shadows for a moment. It was harder to bear his sorrow, all lit up like that. I pulled back the covers and laid down in the cot farthest away from Gable. It was surprisingly comfortable, small as it was. I covered my head with the blankets to shut out the world. Glenn remained by the fire for a long time, long enough for me to push down the urge to go to him. I heard him rise and settle into his cot. I pulled the covers from my head to sneak a peek at him. As soon as everyone was in bed, the fire and the candles all dimmed to a pleasant level for sleeping, he lay on his back, eyes open and staring at the ceiling. A tear slid from his eye and snaked its way down his temple into his curly hair. I took a deep breath and forced myself to remain still. Was he sad because of me or someone else? Lillian, maybe? No, he couldn't be upset because of me. It wasn't like I'd refused outright. I needed more information to make a decision. He drew in a ragged breath and rolled onto his side, his back turned to me. I rolled and turned my back to him. Unless someone gave me some answers, I didn't know what I would do. It took a while, flustered as I was, to fall asleep. Images of that tear kept replaying behind my closed eyelids. When I finally did manage it, I was cast into another dream. I tossed and turned into it unwillingly. It was the first day of college, the first class of the first day, and I sat behind a desk in a nearly empty classroom with my textbook and a venti peppermint mocha. I had worn my best sundress. It was yellow with tiny blue flowers all over. My hair was tied up in a ponytail, But even so, the ends fell past my shoulder blades, tickling the exposed skin of my back. I was nervous, tired, a bit hungover thanks to my much older roommate, and dreading philosophy. If I wanted to learn what a bunch of old dudes thought, I would go to a bar, get them drunk, and hear philosophy all night long. To me, it was all the same. Nietzsche, Descartes, that hippie Dan from the head shop down the road, they all ranked equally with me. It was all talk and high thoughts, but little truth. I was draining the last drops of ambrosia from my cup and didn't notice when the professor walked in. I was looking at the cover of my textbook and covertly glancing at my classmates when I heard his voice. It was deep and had a slight purr to it. "Welcome to philosophy. I am your professor. You can call me Chris. Here you will learn how to think for yourselves, and perhaps even see beyond what may be the limitation of our experiences." I looked up and the breath caught in my throat. He was gorgeous. Average height, with black hair like a seal, shiny and soft-looking. It seemed as if every spare moment not teaching was spent in the gym, and it suited him. I found my attraction to him highly irregular. He was definitely not my type. He was cold, with the pious air of an academic and a dash of narcissism apparent in his flawless fashion sense. Still, I was thankful I hadn't taken my friend's advice and worn pajamas just because I could. "Where you're sitting now will be where you sit for the rest of this class. If you want to move, do it now," he said, waving vaguely at the 20 or so students around me. I heard shuffling begin as all the girls moved to the front. I liked my view fine, a few rows from the front and dead center. I could see him quite clearly. His eyes met mine for a moment before continuing to scan the room. I watched him, hoping he'd look my way again. There was something about him, though, something that made me want to hide under my desk like a child afraid of the dark. If he hadn't been so beautiful, I may have moved to the back row. Ignoring the creepy sensation, I tried to clear my head and actually listen to the lecture. I woke in a sweat. Glenn and Gable were both soundly sleeping. The tent was warm, and all was silent. I was warm too, uncomfortably so. Chris and I had dated. That was obvious from the vision I'd had while chopping onions. How had I gotten past that creeped-out feeling and let him into my house, let alone kiss me? Shaking my head to clear the dream, I got out of bed and stepped barefoot into the cool night air. Ambius, to my surprise, was nearby. He was walking in a large circle under the moonlight, whispering things into the air. His silver robe shone beneath the moons. The light was blue, making the grass an otherworldly shade of blue-green. I moved to go back inside, not wanting to disturb him, but he motioned me over.
"I'm just doing a little spell. Any dreams?"
I looked at him with one eyebrow cocked. "Yes, just now."
"Remember anything new?"
"Not really."
More will come, I'm sure of it."
"Did you do it? Did you make me dream?" I wrapped my arms tightly around myself. I was cold now, the damp grass seeping the heat from me, and still a leaf on the wind.
"Of course. I thought I would help you remember. You are undecided, and that's only natural. Who are we that you should want us to live?"
"Ambius, I want you to live. I do. I just need to know who I am. I'd like to live too, and have a life, not just travel your world running errands for strangers." He chuckled and patted me kindly on the shoulder.
"Go back to bed, child. We have much to discuss tomorrow. Would you like to dream, or would you rather not?"
"No, thank you. I'd rather not."
"Done. Good night, my dear."
He continued his whispering, walking the circle once more. I watched him for a moment, then a brisk wind sent me scurrying back into the warmth of the tent. I ducked inside and stood, warming slowly, before moving further in. Heating myself by the fire, I enjoyed the illusion of being alone. At least I wouldn't dream again. What I'd said wasn't entirely true. I didn't need to know who I was anymore, not as much as I needed to know why all of this had happened to me. I dragged myself back to my cot, crawling under the still warm covers, dusting my feet together to clean them before putting them in bed. I lay there, the covers piled atop me, and willed my body to relax. My mind was another thing entirely. It raced with thoughts and possibilities. Flashes of Glenn's haunted face flitted in my mind's eye, followed by images of his dazzling smile. I felt myself smile warmly in response to that scene, and I rolled over in a huff. I looked over at Glenn, and my stomach clenched. "Why me?" I sighed, letting his resting form linger in my thoughts.
"And why him?"
If you enjoyed this chapter, please give it a like and/or a comment. And if you think someone else might enjoy the story, please share with them the first chapter. You'll always find it in the description and pinned in the comments. If you subscribe and turn the notification bell on, you'll be the first to know when the new chapter is released. I'll release one chapter every week until the audiobook is finished.